this wonderful day. Thank you for this day you have made. How good it is to be under the trees this morning. One more time. Oh Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name, Lord. Oh Lord, our Lord, who are we to you that you give us new birth? We are the gardeners of Eden. We come from the earth and we're returning again. Our spirits belong to you, waymaker, truth shaker. We're following Jesus, our brother and our friend. We're following Jesus. You are the beginning, the middle, and the end. It starts and ends with you. Just acknowledge the Bunjalung people, elders past, present and emerging around Bunjalung country this morning. We acknowledge that it's not easy all the time to walk with you, Lord. I've really been encouraged with this song, and I hope that everyone here is encouraged by this song as well. When I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and the grief that I carry is pounding on my chest, I know, Jesus, you are with me. When sorrow has surrounded and I cannot understand, I reach out in the doubting and hold on to your hand. I know, Jesus, you are with me. You are my shelter, you are my stronghold. Why should I be afraid? All through the struggle, you are my refuge to hide in the depths of your grace. Feel hope rise within me, and a joy I can't explain. I'm building up the courage to trust in you again. I know, Jesus, you are with me. No sorrow has surrounded, won't let it crush my faith. I'll take the disappointments and turn them into praise. I sing, Jesus, you are worthy. You are my shelter, you are my stronghold. Why should I be afraid? All through the struggle, you are my refuge to hide in the depths of your grace. But I'm not gonna wait for you to make all things new. Right here, right now, I lift up my praise. I'm not gonna wait for you to make all things new. Right here, feel hope rise within me, and a joy I can't explain. I'm building up the courage to trust in you again. I know, Jesus, you are with me. Jesus, you are with me. Jesus, you are with me. No matter what we do. Jesus said, if you ask, you will receive. Jesus said, I will show you if you believe. I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you seek, you'll find. Jesus said, come be a friend of mine. We've gathered at your door and we're knocking. We're in the tempest of the world and the boat is rocking. Get to know me, Jesus said. When you welcome the stranger, when you share your bread, don't let your hearts be troubled, don't be distressed. I am the friend of sinners, my friend, you are blessed. We gather at your door and we're knocking. The waves are getting wild and the boat is rocking. Every seeker in Eureka's got a heart tick-tick-tocking. Lord, we're gathered at your door and we're knocking. He said, be quiet. He said, be still. Lord, teach us to hear your voice. Teach us to learn your will. Learn from me, I am gentle and hard. You will find rest for your souls, for my Father set you apart. In my Father's house there are many rooms. Jesus said, I'm going there to make a place for you. That's what Jesus said. to anger, but I misunderstood your love. Forgive me, God, for running. And you sent the winds and stirred up the ocean, and still I rebelled. My heart wasn't open, and but when I prayed, you were there waiting. I made a vow to speak your salvation. Nineveh, oh Nineveh, the Lord is turning toward you. Holy Spirit, help me see where there is Nineveh in me. Turn away your wrath once more, and God have mercy. Perfect prophet, priest, and king, Christ became the reckoning. In his body bore my sin, and now to all who trust in him, God has mercy. Oh, God have mercy on us. Nineveh, oh Nineveh, the Lord is turning toward you. The Lord is turning toward you. The Lord is turning toward you.
This comes from Luke 19, 1 to 10. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. Was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he couldn't see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him. Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost.
Zacchaeus was a tax collector. Who's done their tax this year? Yeah? Due tomorrow? I got a tax bill this year. A big hex bill. And so when the Bible talks about tax collectors as sinners, I'm down with that this year. I can relate. The Bible does talk about tax collectors as sinners. It puts them in this category of sinners, which I think is a little bit strange. Because I think tax collectors, I don't know what visual you have when you hear tax collecting. I think of this dude. Right? I think of some little, like, pencil-necked bureaucrat from the ATO with his calculator and 3 pens in his top pocket, you know? And so I'm like, well, maybe they could be accused of being a little bit nerdy, but I'm not sure if I'd call them sinners. But see, the tax collectors were employed in Jesus' time by the Roman Emperor, right? By the empire. And so Rome didn't really need dudes like this going around collecting taxes. They needed men of hardened muscle who were callous, hard hearts, who just knew whatever it took to get the job done. That's what they do. So this story today we've read says that Zacchaeus was short. And there's a few little songs in Sunday school we used to sing about that. I don't think that really captures the essence of who Zacchaeus was. Like, I think really who Zacchaeus was looked a little bit more like this dude. Do you want to show? So this is Sammy the Bull Gravino. Sammy the Bull Gravino from the infamous Gravino crime mafia family in the States. So this guy was one of the most infamous gangsters of the previous century. Right? Now Sammy the Bull Gravino was only 5'5" tall. He wasn't a tall man. But you wouldn't describe him as short. Like, that wouldn't describe the essence of Sammy the Bull. If you said, oh, he's short. No. He was dangerous. That's who Sammy the Bull Gravino was. And Zacchaeus was probably a little bit more like this, right? Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector, which meant he was in charge of the entire region. He had other tax collectors under him. Right, so the way it would work is tax collectors would make a bid for an area, maybe a suburb, for consignment from the empire. And they'd say, I think I can get this much tax out of this area. And another tax collector would say, well, I think I can get this much, right? And whoever got the highest bid won the consignment. The thing was, if you won it, you had to deliver, all right? Or else your neck is on the line if you don't deliver. So whatever means necessary to extract that money out of the people, that's what you had to do. So tax collectors aren't really like that pencil-neck bureaucrat that we saw before. They're more like this. They're more like mafia bosses. Here's the thing. Tax collectors were local people, though. They were Jewish people. Right? So they were hated not only because they were extorting the people and ripping them off. They were hated because it's like it's one of your own doing this. It's like one of your own people has betrayed you and is now working for this foreign military empire that's occupying your land, that's kicking you out of your farms and oppressing you. You're going to work for them. So imagine how you'd feel about someone like that. How would you feel about someone who had betrayed you for the people who were occupying your land and was then trying to extort money from you? You can see why people thought they were sinners, why they were outcasts. No one liked them. Now we know the story of Zacchaeus, right, from the day he climbed the tree. But I want to tell you a slightly different story today. And if you were here 2 years ago, I told a version of this story then. So you'll have to just bear with me. But sometimes when we look at scriptures, we get it's a brief passage. And it's easy to have a two-dimensional view of who these people are. So I just want to tease it out a little bit and bring some complexity. So admittedly, this is an imaginative look at perhaps what the life of Zacchaeus might have been like. So, little baby Zacchaeus was born in Jericho in the 17th year of the reign of King Herod. And he was given the name Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus means pure and innocent. But little Zacchaeus could not stay pure and innocent. Zacchaeus was born into a poor family. They worked as day labourers on one of the farms that the wealthy landowners of Jericho ran. And Zacchaeus' family were religious. His mother and father and brothers and sisters, they all went along to synagogue. And little baby Zacchaeus loved synagogue. He loved the singing, he loved the worship, he loved kids' synagogue where they would go and do fun things. He loved the stories, Noah and the ark, David and Goliath. little Zacchaeus loved all that. It was great fun. Now, unfortunately, when Zacchaeus was only 6 years old, his father was involved in a tragic accident, working as a labourer in one of these wealthy estates. And he was killed. And not only is this a tragedy for a small boy and his mother, this also put them at risk of poverty. So poverty in this day and in their time is not just like a theoretical demographic. Poverty is a daily struggle for survival. And this is now the reality of Zacchaeus. When he was 12, he got a job harvesting dates at one of these farms. I don't know if you've seen how people harvest dates, but you've got to climb up the trees to get them. And so him and a group of boys would just spend all day climbing up trees, harvesting these dates. And Zacchaeus got pretty good at it, right? He could just shimmy up the tree, a bit like Will was up there before. Like Will could be a good date harvester later in life, something to aim for. He was good, and it would earn him a few shekels, right? Which he'd contribute to his family, but it's only a few shekels, right? And so he grew up still in poverty. And because he was poor, he was never dressed very well. And because he was never dressed very well, he became a bit of a target for local bullies. He was picked on. But Zacchaeus, when he was picked on, he would fight back. And he found he'd let his fists do the talking when these boys came and picked on him. And all these years of climbing trees had made him strong, right? He was short, but he was stocky and muscular. And he would fight off these people who were bullies. And that's where Zacchaeus got his nickname, Zach the Bull. That's what they would call him, Zach the Bull. He was short, but he was stocky, and he would fight off people who were bullying him. Then one day, when he was 17 years old, a tax collector came past his house. And this tax collector said, Zacchaeus, how'd you like a job? And Zacchaeus was like, oh, well, I've got a job. Right? I climb date palms. That's what I do. I collect dates. And the tax collector was like, well, how would you like a job that pays real money? Zacchaeus is thinking, well, that sounds all right. We need money. Yeah, what have I got to do for this job? The tax collector said, well, you don't really have to do anything. I think your presence will be enough. I'm out collecting taxes, and you can just stand with me. And perhaps if people need some persuading, maybe you can do that as well. So Zacchaeus started his career as a tax collector. And you know what? He was pretty good at that too. So good that by the time he was 21, his tax collector put Zacchaeus in charge of the whole south side of Jericho. Right? And during this time of working in Jericho, he would be collecting taxes, delivering it to the Roman stations where they collected it, and so he got to know quite a few of the Roman officers. Now again, these people are sort of considered the enemy, right? They're imposing themselves and their rule on your land. But Zacchaeus is working with them, right? And so he gets to know a few of them, and what he finds is like some of these young men, they're not that different from him, right? They're just young men trying to make their way in the world. And he's a young man trying to make his way in the world, and their paths cross, and might as well make some money out of the situation. And so Zacchaeus got along with them pretty well. He developed a good relationship. By the time Zacchaeus was 27, oh, hang on, I've missed something. So he's getting along with them well, but during this time he's also still going to synagogue, right? He still has his family religion that he's been brought up with. He still goes to synagogue. He still loves the songs. We've got some great musicians there, loves singing the songs. Still loves the social aspect of synagogue. You know, there were some pretty young Jewish girls there which might have kept him involved and interested. But not that that ever happens in church, but like in synagogue, you know, there were some young ladies that kept him interested. The thing was, they always sort of seemed to overlook him. He didn't know whether it was something about himself, or maybe it was the history of poverty that his family had. Like, because some of the other guys there, their parents were like scribes. You know, they were important people. So he never really got noticed. And he thought to himself, well, I'm just going to keep working as this tax collector gig. Maybe when I get wealthy, then I'll get noticed. Because what he noticed was the wealthy became powerful and the powerful were noticed. And that's what he was looking for. So he'd still be involved in synagogue 3 times a year. He'd go up to Jerusalem for the feasts, like everyone does. Still had his prayer shawl, his talents, which he would wear at synagogue, which was, an important part of his faith. He would still use that and pray with that. Then one day when Zacchaeus was 25 years old, now we call this 5 AD, okay? Simon came to Zacchaeus' house. Simon was the president of the local synagogue. And Simon brought 2 of the elders of the synagogue with him, along to Zacchaeus' house. And Simon was a member of the Pharisee party. And the Pharisees were a political religious group that were trying to take Israel back for God, right? They wanted to make Israel great again. And they were going to do this through moral purity and observance to the law. So take it back. So anyway, they've come to Zacchaeus' house. Knock on his door. Zacchaeus opens the door. Simon says, Zacchaeus, we have come to you with a decision. Zacchaeus is like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And Simon said, Zacchaeus, you are excluded from the synagogue. Zacchaeus is like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Why? And Simon, the president of the synagogue, said, well, you know why. You collect taxes for the Romans. We've seen you fraternize with those Gentiles. Zacchaeus says, well, that's just my job, right? That's what I do. It's my job. And, we get along. Our paths cross. We get along. That's just what I do. And Simon, the president of the synagogue, says, Zacchaeus, you are unclean. You are no longer welcome at our feasts. You are no longer a child of Abraham. You are cast out. Well, that night, Zacchaeus took his prayer shawl and he tore it in two. He was heartbroken. And what happens when people are heartbroken because they're rejected is he let this pain take root in his heart. And it grew into anger. And it grew into resentment. And he said, you know what? If that's how these people see me, well, that's who I'll become. And so he hardened his heart. And he started becoming much more violent and much more aggressive, especially to some of the more observant Jews in Jericho. He drank a lot, he hung out with petty thieves and prostitutes and other disreputable characters. Now, if you'd asked Zach at this point in time whether he still believed in God, he might have said, yeah, sure, I believe in God. Right? If you'd asked him whether he loved God, he would have said, why should I love God? He obviously doesn't love me. Why should I love him? So, Zacchaeus' great love then became money. Because money would give him power, and power would help him to be noticed. Zacchaeus eventually became the chief tax collector in the whole of Jericho, which meant he was quite wealthy, right? Not as wealthy as the Herodians, the royal family who lived in the palace, but up there. He built this beautiful mansion, this like Roman-style villa, and it had colonnades, and it had a swimming pool. And he threw parties, right? Zacchaeus would throw these lavish parties. And what he found was when he threw a party, if he kept the wine flowing and the music pumping, just leave it, Luke, it's all right. Just leave it. If you kept the wine flowing and if you kept the music pumping, people would stay. He'd be surrounded by friends, right? But if he stopped, if the wine ran out, if the music died off, he noticed people would leave. So that built up pressure, right? Keep the image going. Keep it hot and keep it coming or keep it pumping? What is it, Luke? However you like it. This is what you got to do. You got to keep up appearances. You got to keep up the image. You got to keep it going. If you want to be loved, if you want to be liked and noticed, you got to keep it happening. This is what Zacchaeus fell into. It's the end of a party. You know that time in a party where Music stopped, most people have gone, lights are turned down, there's a big mess, it's chilled out, you're doing a bit of cleaning up, and there's a few people just sitting around having a drink. Well, Zacchaeus was sitting with his friend Maximus. Right? Maximus is a Roman soldier, and they're just having a beer afterwards, just chilling out, just chatting. And Zacchaeus says to Maximus, Max, you've seen some awesome things. You must have seen some crazy things as you've gone around the empire, exploits. Like, what's the craziest thing you've seen? Right? And Maximus told him some stories about when he was stationed in Corinth. That was pretty cool. But then Maximus stopped and he paused and he leaned into Zach and he said, that's not the craziest thing I've seen. Zacchaeus is like, what? He's like, you know what the craziest thing I've seen was when I was up at Capernaum 6 months ago. Use that mic? I'm going to swap mics.
Yeah, sorry. It's really...
Can I use this one? Unless we want to boom. All right. Oh, we got some reverb. Can we wind that back? Winding back. We're very down to earth here at Hinterland Chapel. There's no expectation of a slick production. It's just us hanging out under the trees. That's what we do. Reverb down.
That's much better.
Much better? Okay. I'm not I'm not hurting your ears now.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Go back a bit.
where was I? What was the last thing I said? Can someone remind me? Centurion, that's right. So Maximus is talking to his friend, Zacchaeus is talking to his friend Maximus, right, who's a Roman soldier, and he's telling Zacchaeus about his time up in Capernaum 6 months ago. That's where I was. So Maximus says, like, my CO, my commanding officer, right, he had this servant, a boy, and this boy was sick. My CO didn't have a son. So this servant was like a son to him, right? And this guy got really sick. And I've never seen my CO so distressed. He's normally a very sort of together, reserved man, but all of a sudden he was distressed. And the CO said to me, Maximus, there's this Nazarene in town, right? There's this guy in town I've heard of, Jesus the Nazarene. And apparently he's like a wonder worker and a healer. He's in Capernaum. He's down at that fishing little hut down near the lake. Come with me. We're going to try and get him to bring Jesus back here to heal my servant. So middle of the night, they go down to this little fishing hut where they hear this Nazarene guy. And they knock on the door, and one of the disciples opens it up, right? And the CO is like, I'm here to see Jesus. And Jesus comes up to the door. And the CO just... Maximus is telling this story. He said he couldn't believe it. The CO just fell on his knees before Jesus. He just started weeping. And he said, you need to heal my servant. Come, you need to heal him. And Jesus was like, all right, let's go. And then the CO said, no. I'm a man of authority. I understand that. You know, I've got my soldier Maximus here. I tell him to go, he goes. I tell him to stay, he stays. Just say the word and I know my servant will be healed. And this Jesus guy just stood there and smiled and said, let it be as you have said. And so we went back. And you know what? The servant was healed. I've never seen anything like it. And that night, everyone in Capernaum brought all their sick and wounded and injured. They all brought them to this fishing hut. And this Jesus guy healed every single one of them. Maximus said, Zacchaeus, I've never seen anything like this. That is the craziest thing I've ever seen. 6 months goes on. It's the end of another party night, right? Zacchaeus is 50 years old now, all right? He's been doing this for a while. And he's got to keep the music pumping. He's got to keep the wine flowing. Because he's desperate. He has this need, right, to be noticed and to be accepted. And he's sitting back, and it's been another party. That's a really convenient place to stop, Mr. Motorbike Man. Maybe we can... Hey, brother! Come join us. No. He's off now.
That scared him away.
Yeah, it scared him away. So Zacchaeus, right, he's feeling a bit hungover. He's pretty tired. Age is catching up with him. It's the end of another party night. And he's like, it's time to go to bed now. It's the early hours of the morning. And then he starts to hear this noise, right? This ruckus outside his beautiful Roman villa. He's like, what is that? And he's like, I'm going to go tell these guys to just get lost because they're making too much noise. He goes down, opens the door, and there's all of these people there. Like the daylight streams in, you know, when that's like you've been in darkness, you come out, there's light, and he's a bit hungover, but there's all these people here, and they're carrying on. He's like, what's going on? And one of the guys in the crowd said, it's Jesus of Nazareth. He's coming to Jericho. And something just like hit Zacchaeus in the heart. He didn't know why, but he's like, I have to see this man. I have to see Jesus of Nazareth. And so he ran back inside and he got changed and had to clean himself up a little bit, new clothes. By the time he came out, there were like 10 times the amount of people along the road now. And he couldn't see anyone, right? He couldn't see where this Jesus guy might be coming from, you know? Yeah, he was a little bit on the short side, so he couldn't see over the crowd, but the crowds were so deep. There were so many people he couldn't see. And he's like, I want to see this Jesus fella. What do I do? And he's looking around. And then he sees this fig tree. And he's like, all of a sudden he's taken back to his childhood when he used to like climb the date palms. And he's like, I haven't climbed a tree for years, but I'm sure I could do it. I'm sure I could do it. So he hitches up his robes. And he starts climbing up this fig tree. And there's some kids around. They start laughing, right? Because men do not climb trees. Grown men, respectable men do not climb trees. So they're laughing. Imagine like Johnny and Will laughing at me trying to climb a tree in my jeans and doing it in a really awkward job, right? But he gets up there. He's like, I don't really care what they think. I just want to see this Jesus fella. So he's up there and he's looking down the road. And then all of a sudden, over this little rise, he sees these people coming down the street. And he sees one guy sort of in the middle that everyone's following, and he's like, that's Jesus. And people in the crowds are reaching out, they're like, because they're all trying to touch him, because they're trying to be healed, and they're wanting to be near this healer who just life seemed to flow and follow him. And so these crowds are following, and Zacchaeus is like, man, he's coming this way. I'm going to see him. And just before he gets to the tree, Simon, the president of the synagogue committee, steps out onto the road in front of Jesus. And Simon says, oh, teacher, I am Simon, the leader of the local synagogue, and we would love to welcome you to this part of Jericho. And I would like to invite you to a meal at my house. Don't worry, it will be the most kosher meal you've ever seen and experienced. All the preparations have been done. All the purity laws have been followed. We would love to welcome you to our synagogue and to my house. It's weird. It's like Jesus didn't even really hear him. It wasn't rude to him. It's just like he didn't even see him. And Jesus just sort of stepped out and just kept walking. And then Jesus stops and he looks straight up in the tree and he sees Zacchaeus. And you know that moment when someone locks eyes with you? And it's just that moment. And Zacchaeus is like, oh, he's looking straight at me. And Jesus says, Zacchaeus, come down out of that tree. You and I have to spend some time together. I must come to your house tonight for a meal. Zacchaeus is like, this is awesome. Jesus. So he scrambles down the tree, right? And he takes Jesus back to his big mansion. And Zacchaeus is like, he's stoked because not only is this Jesus guy coming to see him, but did you see the way Simon got snubbed? Like, that was awesome. So this is like a double win for Zacchaeus, right? So he takes him back and Zacchaeus knows how to put on a party. He's been doing this this is his speciality, right? So he gets the best wine out. He invites all his friends, all the people. It's not the reputable people of Jericho that come along. It's the underbelly, right? It's the tax collectors, it's the prostitutes, the petty thieves, it's some of the Roman soldiers. But the crowd comes and it's pumping and it's like one of the best parties. And everyone's having a great time. And Jesus is sitting at the head table with Zacchaeus, and the whole night they're just talking and hanging out together. And we don't even know what Jesus says to him, all right? We don't even know. But at some point,
something happens, and Zacchaeus gets up, stands on his chair, ding, 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 and he announces to everyone, he's like, hey, listen up. I'm going to give half of my wealth away to the poor. And everyone's like, whoa, yeah, that's awesome, that's awesome. And then he says, and if I've defrauded anyone, which just quietly is a lot of people, I'm going to pay them back 4 times. And there was like this stunned silence. And then people start cheering. This is amazing. So what's happened here? Right, Jesus looks at him and he's smiling. As Zacchaeus is making these like outlandish, lavish statements, Jesus just sitting back, smiling. Smiling. And then Jesus stands up and he addresses everyone. And he says, today, salvation has come to this house. For this man too is a child of Abraham. Salvation has come to this house. You see, Zacchaeus' greed and violence were symptoms of something deeper within him. They were the symptoms of a distorted soul. And Jesus' radical acceptance and love on that night helped to unravel all of that pain, all of that distortion. And as it unraveled, the overflow was generosity and joy. It just overflowed. Zacchaeus couldn't even help it. He's saying this stuff about giving money away because the overflow was so rich as this distortion in his soul started to unravel. Zacchaeus had been excluded, and now he was included. He'd been told by Simon that he was not a member of a child of Abraham, which is to be a Jew, which is to be included. And now Jesus himself had said this man is included. So a couple of thoughts before we finish. Why couldn't Zacchaeus see Jesus? Well, there were some things about Zacchaeus himself that meant he couldn't see Jesus, right? The story tells us that Zacchaeus was short and so he couldn't see over the crowd. So there were some things about Zacchaeus, maybe some internal things with him, but there were also external things. There was the crowd, right? And they prevented Zacchaeus from seeing Jesus. Sometimes there are things about us, internal in our life, that prevent us from seeing Jesus. And sometimes there are things external to us, circumstances, things that people have done to us that prevent us seeing Jesus. So Zacchaeus does what you try to do if you're trying to overcome both these things. He climbs a tree. He's trying to climb a tree, a ladder of success, a ladder of self-help, a ladder of religious purity to try and overcome these things. But notice in the story, for all the things blocking Zacchaeus, it's Jesus who sees Zacchaeus. It's Jesus who says he has come to seek and to save the lost. Jesus says he's come to bring good news to the poor. He's come to bring sight to the blind, release to the captives and freedom for the prisoners. He's come to seek and to save the lost. See, friends, often we talk about salvation, and this is the way I was brought up. We talk about salvation in terms of it's a prayer you say so that at the end of your life, you either go to heaven or to hell, right? There's a whole history wrapped up in how that understanding came to be about. But when we are faithful to the biblical text, when we actually look into the Bible and see what salvation is, we find it has this origin all the way back to the Hebrew people being emancipated from slavery. God intervenes in people who are in physical slavery and releases them. And the words the Bible used to describe that is salvation. See, salvation is about liberation. People who are set free, sometimes from very real physical circumstances, but sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's psychological. Jesus says those who sin are enslaved to sin. Sometimes it's spiritual. Salvation is about liberation. But there's also another part of salvation, right? So the Hebrew people weren't only set free from imprisonment, they were given a new home. They were planted in a land and given an identity. So salvation is also about coming home. So when you think of salvation from the true biblical sense, this is what it is. It involves liberation from what you've been captive to, and involves restoration of identity. Now, Zacchaeus had been excluded, had been imprisoned in his own mind and his soul and his spirit. He didn't belong. His life was a mess. And Jesus comes to his home and offers him radical acceptance and love. And out of that place, as his soul gets untangled, right, as Zacchaeus is liberated from the bondage that he's in, and as he's restored to be a child of Abraham, to belong, that's when Jesus says, today, salvation has come to this home. Because this man, too, is a child of Abraham. Just to ram home this point a little bit more, sometimes we think of Christianity primarily in terms of morality. Yeah, we think of it in terms of behaviour modification. And sometimes we treat Christianity like some sort of enormous washing machine, where we put like bad people in and they come out good, or we put dirty people in and they come out clean. But if we reduce the gospel to just an image of morality, we've completely misunderstood what the gospel is. Okay, because the gospel is not primarily a holy God making bad people good. The gospel is primarily about a Father God turning orphans into sons and daughters. You may have heard and experienced this your whole life, this negative association. But I just want to reassure you, God is not as interested in making you good as he is in making you whole. That's what the Father God wants to do. He wants to liberate you, and he wants to bring you home. He wants to make you whole. Jesus comes to seek and to save what is lost. He comes to liberate you from slavery, and he comes to restore your identity as a child of God. So it doesn't matter, as we finish here, I just want to impress upon you, it doesn't matter if there are obstacles in your life that are to do with you, which are preventing you from seeing Jesus today, or if there are external obstacles, things that have been done to you, circumstances that are preventing you see Jesus. Jesus is the one who comes to seek and to save the lost. Jesus is the one who comes to us today and looks at each one of us and says, I need to come to your house today. We need to have a meal together. I need to spend time with you. And in that time with Jesus, as he releases the distortions in your soul, the overflow will be generosity and joy and belonging. He will bring you home. How you respond to that invitation is critical. Don't be like the rich young ruler who left disappointed. Be like Zacchaeus, who openly responded. Don't have a no vacancy sign out the front of your door. Keep your door open. Invite Jesus in. Have a meal. He comes to seek and save the lost, and he wants to say to you and your household and your family today, salvation has come to this house. Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, that you are a God who searches and seeks, whether we are a prodigal child, whether we are a lost sheep or a lost coin, you seek us out, Lord, and you want to release us from the bondages that we're in, the slavery that we're in, whether that's self-inflicted slavery or whether other people have done that to us. You want to release us from that, and you want to give us a new identity as a son and a daughter. You want to bring us home. So help us to open our hearts to you this morning.
You are my shelter, you are my stronghold. Why should I be afraid? All through the struggle, you are my refuge. I hide in the depths of your grace. You are my shelter, you are my stronghold. Why should I be afraid? All through the struggle, depths of your grace. Feel hope rise within me, and a joy I can't explain. I'm building up the courage to trust in you again. I know, Jesus, you are with me. Feel hope rise within me, and a joy I can't explain. I'm building up the courage to trust in you again. I know, Jesus, you are with me. Jesus, you are with me.